What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. You're watching Epic-Gnosis. My name is John Feldhaus, speaking on behalf of Verity Talk. Thank you again for tuning in and listening. Just wanted to come at you with something that I love to nerd out about, and it is about infinity. I'm going to be talking to you about numbers, specifically big, infinite numbers. Don't run away. It's not too deep, but it is deep. It'll get you thinking in a good way. It'll get you thinking about God and how infinite he is. So, stick around. Okay. So, what I'm talking to you today, today about, oh gosh, guess what? It's midnight. You can tell, can't you? Anyway, and a little bit of coffee. What I'm going to talk to you today about is how to count past infinity. I'm going to share a little bit about that and why that is even necessary, or is that even possible? Is that even possible? Can you count past infinity? I thought infinity was like, well, it's just all numbers. That's infinity. That it's you cannot reach the end of all numbers. Not necessarily. So, I'm going to define some of our terms here. So, when you're counting, when you're thinking of just numbers in general, you think of things, well, like off the top of my head, I can think of Google. A Google is a huge number, and that's what we get our internet browser from. Googleplexes. You can think of numbers with huge factorials after them, and factorial is just that number multiplied with all the other numbers beneath it until you get this huge number, and you're like, wow, these are so big numbers. What, like, and there's not an end to all the numbers that there are in the world. But these kinds of numbers are different than the numbers I'm talking about today. Those numbers that you think of, those huge quantity numbers that we think of, like astronomically large ones, those are called cardinal numbers. And cardinal numbers, they depict a amount of something. So they are amount numbers. So they're thinking about how big a number is. And let me make sure I'm getting my definitions correct. So there's a cardinal number, there's ordinal numbers. I just described that. Ordinal numbers, so cardinal numbers, they signify an amount or quantity. But ordinal numbers, they notate the order in which numbers come. So, and the reason why that's different is because, so we think of, like, if you think of some people running in a race, you'll have first place, second place, third place, fourth place, and so on, until you've got, and let's say an infinite amount of people are running in a race. You have all the numbers you need in this one set of numbers, which is infinity. Mathematics has a specific term for it called Aleph Null. Aleph is, of course, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Null is like infinity, I guess, to the 0th power, something like that. But Aleph Null is the name used to describe all natural numbers. Natural numbers are just, numbers that have they can all be associated with another number. That's a whole nother topic that I did not research and cannot get into, because that one's even more nerdy than what I'm talking about today. But this is just a way of saying all the finite numbers that you can think of, they are in this set, this infinite bracket. And so, but then when you think of a race, you can still have placements past infinity. If you wanted to count past it, if there's a set of numbers past it, you can give a place to another number. And so it'll be like your 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. And then you have another one to start another set of so-called Aleph Null numbers. you use it, and you just keep on going. I know this is kind of a little what are you talking about? So bear with me here. So in finite numbers, in finite numbers, cardinal and ordinal numbers, they're practically the same because you just assign the first number 1 first, second one 2, great, keep it going. It starts to become less about the amount of something, and it becomes more about the combinations of numbers. You can get a whole nother set of numbers by having what's called a power set. And a power set is like, say you had the number 1 and 2, and you could have nothing in that set. You could have a 1, you could have a 2, or you could have 1 and 2. So that's a power set, and you have 4 numbers already that came out of that one set right there. And then you can do the same thing with 1, 2, 3. You can have 0, you can have 1, you can have 1 and 2, you can have 1 and 2 and 3, you can have 1 and 2, you can have 2 and 3, you can have 1, 2, 3, you can have just 2, you can have just 3, and then it's this big mass of set of numbers that are in this power set. So what you can end up doing is you end up getting more numbers this way, ordered along this huge path, because of basically it's sort of a multiplication process, or really just, it's not even multiplication, it's just making more numbers out of the numbers you already have by having a quote-unquote power set. And then basically you're creating like more numbers. You're like, whoa, there's more numbers. But they're still the same numbers, but they just are they're ordered differently. And so that's the big push that I'm trying to push for, is there's an order that keeps going. Now it's not like 1, 5, 3, 1,968,000, whatever. It's not like that kind of order. You still have, so if you think of the number that they use. Oh, and I meant to show you this too, just to give you some visual. This is Aleph Null. I know it's backwards for you, but that's what Aleph Null looks like, notated, if you were curious about that. And that's representing all natural numbers. This is called omega. It's the lowercase Greek omega symbol, and that's used to that's assigned as like the all. It's like basically the number that represents all natural numbers. And then you can say, well, if you're going to the next ordered number, you would go omega plus 1. And then you can go again omega plus 2, omega plus 3, and it keeps going like that. And you can basically, what happens is they repeat this process of making more numbers like this, and you end up having a set where all of these numbers repeat, but in a different way, to where they are different in order, but they're the same amount. But then when you the more you repeat that, the greater amounts you end up creating out of that. You end up finding out there is a cardinal amount to be reached through this ordering that occurs. So it's really crazy, and I'll get to an application for all of this in a little bit, because it doesn't, and I wish I had more of a visual to give you. And if you are looking for a visual to kind of help visualize this, I got some of this info, a lot of it from there's a channel on YouTube called Vsauce, the letter Vsauce, and really cool, really brainiac stuff. And every once in a while, when I want to get my mind like whoa, that's crazy, and just to get you thinking about the world and how stuff works. Because again, the way I think about things is like I'm thinking about how God created everything, and about how to understand God in a better way through creation and what He's given to us to learn, I watch videos like that to think about, whoa, this stuff is so cool, and this points to you, God, and this points to you, which is what I'm about to do. So, and of course, it's to prove that there are other infinities that contain more things. So, cardinal numbers are basically pointing to how many things there are. But then an ordinal number points to what order those things go in. And so in order to get to a higher cardinal number, you have to make sure you have well-ordered numbers. They order themselves. You order them along a line. Okay, I digress. Let's keep going. And these are legit things. This isn't just something made up. This is something they're doing in mathematics. And really, to just kind of backtrack, there are a lot of discoveries that were made. Like back in the day, the concept of zero didn't make sense to people in math. It didn't make sense, but somebody came up with it, that you can have a number 0, which represents the absence of something. And it was really useful for discoveries in science and discoveries in quantifying things. They didn't have a number for 0, and to us that just seems like so elementary. That's so basic. There's a 0. That's nothing. It's 0. 0 cakes, 0 hairs on his head, 0 trees, whatever. But to them, this was revolutionary. Excuse me. And another thing that was really big, which didn't have an application for it for a very long time, was number theory, about the importance of numbers and how numbers by themselves can be huge for communicating and creating all on their own, that they don't have to represent something or a quantity, but that they can be used all on their own to create stuff. Well, we have that thanks to the number theory. We have the internet. You have zeros and ones depicting everything that you see on a computer screen. You have zeros and ones coding everything that you have at your fingertips on your smartphone. Numbers are what make all of this stuff possible. It's the way that computers communicate with one another. You need numbers in order to do all of this. Numbers, actually Galileo said himself that numbers are the language of the universe. You want to get to know the secrets of the universe, you learn how to speak the language of numbers. Numbers are very important, and I believe that anything that you can study that is applicable to life it can be an art form. Music and painting and dancing, they're all art forms in themselves, because you can become technical and you can understand them to such a great degree and have such a fine-tuned application of the arts that we call them the arts, the visual expressions and vocal expressions of personal traits and stuff, depicting beauty and everything. But you can do the same thing with science and math. You can depict the beauty of nature through making these discoveries and being so articulate with it and so knowledgeable of it, able to describe what goes on in biology, what goes on in what goes on in the oceans, what goes on with plants. You can have all this knowledge of physics, how things fall to the ground, the forces that make the earth move around the sun, and photosynthesis and how it absorbs the sun's light, and chemistry, how chemicals come together and create all the elements that are around us, and it shows how beautiful everything is by, like, it's not just a thing that's there, it's made of something. And seeing that everything is made of something else contributes to this idea that things aren't just there, they came from someplace. And seeing that I'm like, how can you not believe that there's a God? Um, but it's because people's hearts are darkened and they don't want to believe that there's a God. They want to believe that nature is just nature on its own, and it's, you know, it's able to be appreciated just for what it is. And while I agree, nature is great just to look at nature, but it's like I'm always pointed towards, how big God is, and that's why I'm like numbers, infinity, specifically infinity is a big thing. It's like, oh, you can count past infinity, um, but it's like it's it requires just this openness of your heart and mind to grasp all of this. Um, yeah, and just more applications for things. It, we had cars, we had atomic study, we had relativity and the internet, to name a few of these things that they made much more available to us, much more possible to us, and we could have realized at the time that it was doing. And so through this study of like counting past infinity, there are other things that I believe that they could be this concept could be used for, even though there's no real world application for it right now. It seems kind of like, what's the point? Why would anyone care about this? Well, I mean, that's that's what everyone said about computers and stuff back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. It's like, who cares? But you realize computers and being able to communicate with people on a larger scale made it possible for us to go to the moon. You wouldn't have had that, and they did it with a um, lot less powerful of like, um, they were working with just barely even megabytes of data and memory, sending up a whole rocket with these things. Nowadays, we have like terabytes and stuff that we put just our everyday stuff onto tablets and phones with. They barely had megabytes to do that with back in the day. And I just think that's so crazy that they were able to do that. But it made the way for more advancements to come along. And and I was watching something else the other day. There's somebody talking about that they have a quantum computer that they're working on right now, something that processes things just mega super fast, able to make discoveries on its own through it's not AI, but it's like a well, just looking at this contraption, this big this big quantum computer. It's very reminiscent of what was going on in the 70s with they had full rooms where it was one computer but all these screens, but it was one computer that filled up this whole room, uh, with all this data and information. And now we've gotten all of that compiled into just a little square onto our phones and stuff. The same thing's going on with this huge quantum computer. It looks like a big chandelier, and it's gold. They use gold as a conductor to they got to have massive amounts of energy to cool down and heat up the computer, because it well, not heat up, because they got to cool things down. It gets very hot because of how hard and fast things are processing. And so you got to have a high number of high bits of data that are going into this super quantum computer processing things. And so what quantum's doing is, and this is also another topic for another time, the quantum computer is like taking it takes way more possibilities and explores those possibilities and uses them to code things and explore information, makes information way more accessible and quick to gather in and store. So looking at the way that we're talking about counting past infinity, it seems like doing this would be a way to help reach this. There's quantities of power needed and places to go with quantum thinking and computing and stuff that they're probably going to need, that comes from the process of counting past infinity, so to speak. And but it's like, but so I'm saying that, and you might be thinking, well, what are they trying to play God? Only God's infinite. Well, see, God is above everything. He's not just infinite. He's eternal. And eternity does not end. Eternity can't be quantified. Eternity doesn't stop. So an infinite amount of numbers, you can maybe count past that and have sets of numbers that keep on going forever and ever, but that doesn't stop either. And they have a term for this last number that they're like hoping to reach for one day, but so far they call it the inaccessible cardinal, or the inaccessible quantity number, that they're hoping to reach with all of their ordinal numbers that don't have a quantity on their own but are as a set, reach a greater capacity than just the numbers within Aleph Null. And they have different names, of course, for all of that. They have omega times omega times omega. Then they have epsilon one. Epsilon one is another kind of number. So infinity, or Aleph Null, is just a kind of number. It's an infinite number. It's a number full of all infinite things, and it keeps going on. But then there's other numbers that have the same amount of that, but then they keep getting more and more of these. And it's so crazy to try and wrap your mind around all of that. But even with that, there's an inaccessible cardinal that they're like, we're probably never going to reach it, and you can't reach it from the bottom up. Just like within infinity, or Aleph Null, there's no number within the finite group of numbers that's in there that can ever reach. No combination of those numbers can ever reach Aleph Null. So the inaccessible cardinal, and this one is represented by a theta. So Aleph, of course, is the number, or is the letter in the Hebrew alphabet, the beginning. So it's like, this is just the beginning, the infinite beginning of numbers. The omega number that you see right here is, of course, supposed to be the last letter in the Greek alphabet. But it's lowercase too, kind of signifying that it's like, this isn't the last of the last. We're just trying to come up with something that kind of shows the ultimate grandness of how big all of these numbers are. Well, then this last one is, where'd it go? The theta. Looks like that. It looks like a zero with a slash in the middle, or a line in the middle, a bridge, so to speak. That's a Greek letter. And theta is one of the letters that spell out the word God in Greek. And so I think that's kind of a nod to, and really a suggestion of how big this number is, this inaccessible cardinal number called theta. Theta is by far, in the math world, it's the biggest number there is. Inaccessible, can't be reached from the bottom, has to be reached from the top. And so how does all of this make me think of God? Obviously, the theta thing, that's what I was showing you, is like, it's a reference to who God is, this inaccessible number that's way far above, that can't be reached through a natural or through any kind of number that's below or beneath it. But it can be reached from the top. And the more and more people think about it, the more and more they try to think of things that might be above whatever. They might think that there's something above theta, and they think that they've reached it. But I believe it's sort of like a threshold that they believe they're never going to reach. Excuse me. But one of the things that it makes me think of is how God, he is above everything, right? He has access to us, but we don't necessarily have access to him through these natural means, through all of the natural ways that we try to reach him. But he knows how much stuff there is, and it can only be approached from his side of eternity. He is the only one who has access to all of this. But the way in which we have access to it ourselves is through being seated with Jesus in heavenly places. I always think of that, and I think it's like um, I always try to make sure I bring it around to where I realize I have access to this knowledge and this infinite wisdom that comes from God through Jesus, through his blood, and he is the head of all things. I think of it, if you want to use some of these numbers and symbols as representatives of things in the Word of God, you could use Aleph Null as sort of a representative of who Jesus is. The Bible says that Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. Um, and he's infinite. He's God, right? And so all these things proceed from him. For him are all things, and to him are all things. And he's a representative of who God is. And you could say this theta number is sort of representative of who God is, completely inaccessible. But the clue to how he's accessed is how Aleph Null was accessed and added upon. But it's only through the Aleph Null that we're able to understand what the theta is. It's this completely inaccessible number through finite numbers. Theta is a number that you can't even access through these infinite numbers. So, but it says in the Bible that we will be searching the depths of his wisdom and knowledge. We will be searching out and pressing into for all of eternity. And so I would venture to say that theta is sort of a representative of what eternity is. Never ending, pressing into the order and how God has ordained things throughout all of time. Time is an order. Time has order to it. It's like you don't get to go ahead of the line in time. But God himself is outside of time because he's the inaccessible cardinal that nothing can access it from below, and he's above all things, right? So think on that. Isn't that kind of cool? But so it's like one of the things that just kind of I feel like definitely refutes the thing that people want to say about men and women or human beings is that we're just, beasts with bigger, intellects able to comprehend abstract thoughts. And so we think of things like infinity and make up all these rules and stuff. And I'm like, well, we wouldn't think of these things unless there was a frame of reference for thinking about that. It's like, and where does this come from? And I believe the word says it, that the Bible says that God has placed eternity in the hearts of every man. But the only thing man's not able to access is the beginning and the end of God's wisdom. We're never able to find where it starts. We're never able to find where it ends. But we are able to keep on searching through it and pressing into more of who he is. In geometry, to get more mathematical on you. So if you think of what a line is an infinite amount of points that just keep going straight out one direction into another. And a cool scripture to think about how to think of that is God has removed and he casts our sin as far from us as the east is from the west. That's how far that goes. And that's what a line is. A line is as far as the east is from the west that keeps on going in geometry. So, and you represent that with, the line and then like two arrows that say, hey, this keeps on going. Cool, great. And so then you have a line segment, which is just a bunch of those points. And you have point A, point B, and all of them going together like that. But then it has a beginning and an end. There's nothing else to that. You make your shapes with that. You measure the line. You do all that kind of fun stuff with mathematics. Great. But one of the things that I think is interesting that I think is sort of, so that line, I believe, represents God. That line segment represents things that are temporary and are destined to end. But we are different. We're very different. We're like what is in geometry called a ray. A ray has a beginning point, but it has no end. A ray keeps on going forever. And you can think of a ray in nature like a ray that shines from the sun, a light ray or a gamma ray or some kind of ray, something that goes out from a source, but then it doesn't stop going. A beam of light is a ray that keeps on going, and it shines from a star, and it keeps on going until it meets us here on Earth. And according to most science, which it's probably true, billions of years this light has taken to reach us. I've heard theories on how this is possible. There's time dilation stuff. I was going to try and talk about that, but that was too much research for this subject. But and as you can tell, as you know, I can talk about something for a long time. But this is cool. That a ray is kind of representative of who we are. We proceed from God, and we're made in His image, right? We come from Him, but we have this same mindset as He does, to keep on going into eternity. We don't stop. Our line keeps going. Our ray keeps on going. Excuse me. But that's the kind of creatures we are, to have this taste and this insatiable desire to press into the infinite and eternity, and to keep on thinking about that, and to keep making discoveries, and not be like, well, this is all there is to discover. It's like there's always more to discover, because God has made all of these things infinite. And so what's the point of counting? He's the God of order, and he likes us knowing how He does things, because we're His children, and He wants us, so to speak, to know how the family business is run. He's the creator, and He's the God who made all of the earth, all of the worlds, all of, there's talk of multiple universes. I'm not sure if that's true. It's definitely a possibility, not something to rule out. But I believe God is the God of it all. He's the infinite, eternal. He is the eternity that you cannot press past. So there's no going. I don't know, but the more discoveries that end up getting made, it made me think of something that a father in the faith of mine, brother Hagen, he said that the more I learn about God, the more I realize that I don't know anything about Him. And it was just a reference to the fact that God is so big, and the more you learn about Him, it's like unlocking the doors that have been around you in this room that you knew about for such a long time, but you finally unlock these doors, and you're like, I got the answers now. And it sets you free, and it gets you more room to move and more stuff to have access to. But then all that stuff has more mysteries in and of themselves. And it's all this stuff you didn't realize you did not know before. But now you realize there's way more to this than I realized. There's so much more to God than I can even fathom. It's like, what? This is nuts. That's how God is. And they're discovering the same thing in science, math, anything that there is something to study. They find out there's smaller and smaller particles. There's larger and larger stars. There's more and more galaxies. There's probably more universes. We don't know. It's crazy. But the universe in and of itself is kind of like it's an infinite thing. But we just got done talking about how infinity can even have a sort of limit. But God's wisdom is infinite. It's like there's nothing past God. It's you'll be thinking about this. I think about stuff like this a lot, and you'll just be like, man, like I'm like, I don't know what to do this. It just makes me in awe of Him. And it even more so because it's like He created us, seemingly very infinitesimally small, but yet He cares about and loves us. And sometimes, amongst us nerdy jokesters, we're like, oh, what's your favorite number? It's like, No one else, and nobody but a nerd has a favorite number. Some of us kind of Hebrew and Bible scholar people have a favorite number because there's, divine numbers. We believe there's like, 3 is the Trinity, and so people like 3. 7, a lot of people like 7 because 7's usually a lucky number, but it's also the number for for eternity. Usually, and referred this number 7 is usually referred to God's spirit. The 7 spirits of God are in Revelation. It's just a phrase for referring to God and His eternal nature. 8 is the number for courage. 9 is another number of the Spirit. It's used for reference to the fruits and the gifts of the Spirit. 10 is the number of completion. 12 is a number of government. 40 is a year, usually referencing a time period of testing and trial, and God proves His people through a 40-year span. Moses had to wait 40 years in the desert in a proving time before God could come and find him and say, hey, now go set my people free. Go talk to Pharaoh. There's these different numbers that are used for significant things, but it's like a favorite number. It's like I think God, we might. Now this is a theory. I just thought of this. This may sound weird, and you can totally throw this out. This sounds weird, but I'll just say it. Maybe there's a number associated with our real name. In the book of Revelation, where it talks about we'll be given a new name. It'll be written on a stone that we'll have for eternity. Jesus himself has a new name. And there's a lot of number association with people's names in the Hebrew language too. So we could have a number associated with our real name. And that is to say, I think God has a favorite number, and it's you. He has your number, and He loves it. He loves your number. He made your number. He's got your number. And, yeah, He loves you. He loves you so much. He's got all this infinite stuff that He could be looking at. He's got all these big galaxies and stars and black holes sucking in stars and all these big things that He could be looking at and thinking about and may seem more important to Him. But no, you are more important to Him than a big star exploding or a galaxy about to collide with another galaxy. You are very important to God. So, let's see. I think that's all I have for today. So, I think we're good. So, thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope that made sense. If not, you can just kind of be like, well, yeah, God's big. Praise God. Yeah, cool. And share this with a friend, somebody who might be a nerd like me, or if somebody is interested in this kind of stuff about numbers and about counting past infinity. I'll try to put a link maybe below here. I'm going to put this video on YouTube and Facebook here, to the video that kind of inspired this line of thinking. And they're not necessarily a Christian, website. So they come to conclusions that are more like, aliens and human discovery, and like, wow, we're so amazing in our thoughts. And I'm kind of like, okay, whatever. No, God's amazing, and he gave us this ability, and so He's cool. But shout out to Vsauce. They're cool. Anyway, I think that's all I have for now. Go ahead and make sure this video is going to come out by tomorrow. It took me a little longer to get this video going and out there. So tune into mine, and then right after you're done with mine, tune into Ryan's podcast. She's just got audio, I think, but it's great what she talks about because it's super edifying as a Christian. I just really get this sense of, God's peace and presence from it, that you're just, it's very solid stuff she talks about. So it's very cool. Don't forget to tune into Jordan's stuff. He was talking about how God's not, you don't limit to Him to, a gender, even though He prefers to be referred to as He. I personally think, I'll put my 2 cents in here since I'm talking, that God is a he, but it's like Jordan was saying, it's not about reproductive stuff. God doesn't need to reproduce himself through organs that only men and women have. God's way above that. The Bible also does say that God's not a man that he should lie, neither the Son of Man that he should repent. There's that to think about too. But my 2 cents is that he likes being referred to as a man because, one, he's our father, and he's reflected his nature in fathers, as he's the protector and the provider and the giver of life. Actually, I'll stop talking because Jordan referred to a couple of these things, and it was very good. It was good. We might talk about more of this on tomorrow, Sunday. Don't miss out. We're gonna have our next T2 Mug Hour. That T2 stands for Talking Together. T2 Mug Hour. We're gonna bring our favorite mugs, and we're gonna talk about anything and everything together. Me, Ryan, Jordan, all together. One big happy family. Gonna be fun. So don't miss out. It's gonna be fun. How many times can I say it's gonna be fun in a video? It's gonna be fun. So, again, thanks for tuning in. Love you all, and don't forget, share this with a friend, because this is interesting stuff. This is cool stuff, and it'll bless them, and it's a way to minister to people. The gospel. Yeah. Blah blah blah. I'm done. And if I don't see you again till tomorrow, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.